Welcome in, everybody. It's the Important Nonsense Podcast. Steve Bonham, Neil Smith, Mike Manning. Guys, how you doing? 32 and 32. We're back.
I'm doing good, but let's check in on that after we get done talking about the Chicago Bears.
I mean, do we really have to do this? I mean,
do we say that every year? And the answer is
yes.
We're contractually obligated to do this.
Yeah.
Should I just do the show by myself so you guys don't have to cry the whole time?
Hey! All right,
well,
I'll see you later. That's
okay,
the
so
best
Mike
I've
has
ever heard all
volunteered.
day.
Thanks.
Yep.
Oh, that's not
go.
what we were looking for.
Are you sure? I mean,
you volunteered. Don't make those offers because we will leave.
Don't threaten me with a good time because I'll get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
As always, 12-team PPR for all this stuff. So if any of this seems irrelevant to you, it could be the scoring settings. You can adjust it accordingly. Also, we are recording this on July 23rd. So if anything is outdated, that would be why. We drop these new episodes every single day for you guys on our YouTube channel. But if you're part of our Patreon at either the $3 or $5 tier, you can get these 2 days early. So you can join at patreon.com/importantnonsense and get all the information before the general public. Plus, it gives you access to our Discord and ask us any questions you want all the time. It's fantastic. So let's get right into it. Unfortunately, the Chicago Bears. Starting at the top, Justin Fields. At least something to cheer for, right?
It is.
Something to feel like you have some kind of hope, maybe a little bit, sort of.
As
long as he's used properly.
Well, I was going to say, he's still young enough that you still have that hope in your heart where it's like he might develop into something someday, and there's still that upside that exists.
Right.
And then that goes right out the window the minute
Still
you just move your eyes
Yeah.
slightly to the right. It just dies.
Yeah. So Justin Fields, of course, had a rocky rookie season through no fault of his own. Was playing behind Andy Dalton and Nick Foles for some reason. But luckily, Matt Nagy is gone, although it doesn't seem like things have gotten much better for him. Fields had arguably the best rushing game from week 8 last year and the best passing game from week 9 of any rookie last season, and did it in back-to-back weeks. Now he has the worst supporting cast, arguably, among all sophomore QBs. And I don't even think you need that qualifier. I mean, just look at the depth chart. He has arguably the worst supporting cast of any QB from any season. So I think that Fields this year is going to try and have this breakout season or this comeback season, but I don't know, Neil. I'm skeptical personally, but I don't know if that's me being a fantasy analyst / realist, or if that's just me being the sad Bears fan.
It's both. And that's what I was just working my way into. It's a good hedge. It's both. So this is an interesting one because I think actually we're very much in line with just about the rest of the industry here. It's funny because Justin Fields still occupies this fantasy space of upside, like backup level quarterbacks. So I've got him at 16. You've got him at 17. The ECR has him effectively right in line with that 16. So he just occupies this space where we haven't really seen him fail yet. So there's still that hope, and there's the belief that he could turn it around. But the other reason why he gets to occupy this space is the rushing floor.
Yeah.
That's the thing that you do get a little bit of rushing with Justin Fields. He's not in that upper echelon of it, but you do get a little bit of a safety blanket here. So he occupies that backup quarterback space. Backup quarterback with upside is what I like to refer to tier 5 as. That's kind of what you're looking at when you go through the rankings. So with that in mind, I think that's about right. Would you not? It seems like you and I are in alignment.
He's in my tier 5 as well. So that tier for me is Trey Lance, who I think is getting way overdrafted.
Yeah. Oh, me too. That's insanity.
But then Justin Fields, Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence, and Daniel Jones, who I still cling on to a small amount of hope that just maybe possibly Daniel Jones won't be horrendous. But that's my tier 5 right there. And Fields
that's how tier
fits
5
into
works.
That category of he's not somebody that I want to rely on as my weekly starter, but if he's my backup, he's got the upside to potentially be a top 5 guy with the Konami code running back.
It's funny because my tier 5 is Trey Lance, Justin Fields,
Yeah.
Tua Tagovailoa, and Trevor Lawrence. But you'll notice that Daniel Jones does not occupy that space.
Again, you're not a crazy person, so that's fine. I'm all right with that.
But yeah, tier 5. It's what tier 5 is there for. It's your upside guys that you still have hope that they might be able to pop and become something, and they're great backup quarterbacks for your fantasy roster in leagues where you would roster 2 quarterbacks.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. As we saw last year, like Fields has the upside both in the rushing and the passing game. I think the best rushing performance in a game by a rookie quarterback was Fields in Week 9 against San Fran, where he ran for over 100 yards. We saw him break multiple tackles and, on designed runs and everything. And then his best passing game was the very next week against Pittsburgh, where he threw for over 230, 40 yards, had multiple touchdowns, like great passes that you saw. Like those were the best games, I think, a rookie quarterback played.
That was the game when he won it on Monday night, right?
He lost it, but they almost won it.
Almost won it on Monday.
Yeah, it was like a, late field goal.
Right.
That the Steelers
defense lost it. Yeah.
Probably. I mean, you could call it either way you want. Either way, in the win column.
That's the way I like to look at it.
Pittsburgh got the win, so you can put it whatever way you want. So he is the epitome of a late round quarterback that you would love to have as your QB2 that has the upside, even with his scary weapons.
Like what you're saying, he's going 1 pick behind Tua Tagovailoa in the 10th round. So
that's about right.
We're always in the neighborhood of punt QB. Like you can wait on QB, don't pay up for one early. 10th round, 11th round for a quarterback with the upside of Fields. I mean, that's basically what you're looking for, right? Like you get a safety net guy like a Matt Ryan, Ryan Tannehill, who are going even 2 or 3 rounds after that,
right,
as your like safety blanket quarterback, and then Fields is your 100% upside, and you just stack skill position players.
Or if you don't necessarily have the stomach for that, you could put your khaki pants on and find yourself Kirk Cousins a round prior or something like that, and just stack it that way. So you could get a little bit of a slightly more comfortable safety. Yeah, you get your khaki pants on and you draft some Kirk Cousins or some Derek Carr. Yeah, that's you get your Dockers. That's exactly what you do.
Yeah, Cousins is going at the end of the 9th, top of the 10th. There you go.
So
and Fields is going about halfway through the 11th.
If you want to do it that way, that's another way you could do it. You could stack them and just run them that.
100%. Beyond that, no one cares about Trevor Siemian. Even in Chicago, nobody cares about Trevor. Even he's from Chicago, nobody cares about Trevor Siemian. Doesn't matter. And the Peterman, wherever
we've already
wherever John Gruden is angrily screaming, he is happy about Nathan Peterman still being on the roster right now. Let's move on to running back. David Montgomery. He is one of the few workhorse running backs still left in the NFL. His ADP, though, you would believe because of, the roster that we're talking about, right? Complete dumpster fire. He's the running back on a bad team, so you feel like there's not going to be a lot of situations where he's running. But in situations when he's been the pass-catching back, he has thrived. The problem for him has always just been, again, injury history. Can he stay on the field? Right now, he is RB 18 in ADP. So he's someone that I feel like you can have relatively cheap, but we've seen in the past has top 12 upside. It's just how many games of top 12 upside are you going to get out of it?
You and I all three of us seem to have this broadly the same. His ADP is 18, but we've got him ranked at 14, 15, and 16 respectively.
Yeah. So
we're just slightly more bullish than his current ADP. Also, I think that ADP will change as we get a little bit closer. He'll probably bump up a couple spots just because of the workload. But the issue is that they're so devoid of other options, as we'll get into here in a moment, that even if they are in situations that you wouldn't consider to be optimal running situations, I think they're going to be relying on the running game pretty heavily. Yeah. I think that's the plan for this year, just from reading the tea leaves, is we're going to try and get out ahead and run the ball early and often, try and establish that run the team that way, and try and do it old school Chicago way, ground and pound, have Fields help you run with some design stuff, and then short passes, and just kind of, it's going to look like those people in Madden who just grind you out. Like it's going to be like that type of situation, a classic Steelers team, even for example, from back in the day, where you just ran the ball a million times and played defense. So I think that's kind of what you're looking at here, because the rest of the roster would tell you that if you're expecting to get things out of the passing game, but they're going to struggle if they start falling behind in games, is going to be the other thing. So the question becomes, can Montgomery can he, do you guys think he can hold up to that workload? And B, do you think he'll be involved enough in the passing game to kind of carry you the rest of the way?
I mean, I believe that he will miss at least a game this season. I think it's kind of expected that he's not going to play all 17. He's behind a bad offensive line. This is one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. But we've also seen running backs in these situations succeed and have good fantasy seasons. I mean, just think of like James Robinson a couple years ago in his rookie season. He was on a very bad team that ended up having the number 1 overall pick, and he still had an RB1 season just because of pure volume and getting the touches where it matters. You know, red zone, things along those lines, in the receiving game as well. So it's just, this team is not afraid to give him the touches. They're going to. Indianapolis was top 5 in rushing last year. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor, you're going to be, and with Carson Wentz at your quarterback. And so if that coaching staff comes over and has the same mentality as they had success with last year, this team's Chicago's going to go from the 20th to top 5 in rushing.
Yeah.
Which is only good for Montgomery.
Yeah. And I think too, there's a non-zero chance. Like I have right now him projected conservatively as the number 3 target on this offense. It's Darnell Mooney, it's Cole Kmet, and then it's David Montgomery. Those are your pass catchers on this team, because everybody else is such a huge question mark that we don't know where they're going to end up. So I think Montgomery could even pass Kmet out of the backfield and have a Matt Forte-like season from a decade ago where he's up near 100 targets if this team is throwing enough and they're checking down enough, and Kmet isn't as involved, Kmet is injured, whatever the case may be, that they're relying more on the back, out of the backfield. But yes, the question is, can Montgomery stay on the field? I believe he can. Now, the question becomes, what's his safety blanket? Because it was Damian Williams. Then he got hurt. Khalil Herbert stepped in, who nobody had heard about, except for us. We talked about in the preseason show and on the draft coverage. But Khalil Herbert steps in, has a very good showing, and does so well that they retain him as the full-on backup, let Damian Williams go. So now do you trust Herbert in that role? He was a top 24-ish guy the couple weeks that he started last season. So do you trust Herbert as the backup? Is this another situation where you get a cheap handcuff to your starting running back if you get Montgomery?
I do, and I do. To both of those things. I trust him completely, and I view this as another situation where if you'd like to spend up on a David Montgomery on your team, and I think we're making the argument here that you would probably want to do that, well, one of the benefits of that is that you can get Khalil Herbert for virtually nothing at this point. He's not as free as Donta Foreman is, I'm sure. But
no, it's roughly the same thing. 16th round instead of undrafted, but it's essentially
but he's at least on the page. So,
yeah.
But you have I've got him at 61, Herbert, and you've got him at 64. Mike, you have the note. He was the only RB to reach 100 rushing yards against Tampa Bay in 2022. It's small sample size, but I do like the note because that was a thing, as we talked about last year. So I think if something goes wrong with Montgomery, Herbert has the ability to be an RB2 for you that you can have for nothing at the end of your draft. And that's one of those things that you're always happy to find when you're evaluating how you want to get your running back room done.
Yeah, I mean, Montgomery averaged over 20 touches a game, and Khalil Herbert, when he was the main guy, had over 20 touches a game. It was a seamless, just, all right, next guy up, you're going to get all these touches.
Yep.
And he showed that he was a good enough running back to make stats out of that. Like, he produced with that kind of workload.
Right. And worth noting, Darrington Evans, just a name to know. He's the 3rd guy on the depth chart, and it'll remain that way. He's mainly going to be a special teamer for them, but he will be there, and he will fill out that running back room. But again, just a name worth knowing. wide receiver. So last year was supposed to be the Allen Robinson breakout. We were told that the Bears were back, baby. It was a total lie.
We were lied
Total
to.
lie.
We were sold a bill of goods that was very fraudulent with that statement.
So Darnell Mooney was the wide receiver 2 in the offense last season, but was primarily the wide receiver 1 for the whole first half. So we thought at some point defenses would pivot and start covering him as the wide receiver 1 with the top corner, and they did, and it didn't matter.
Yeah.
And then they didn't bring back Allen Robinson, so now it's just the Darnell Mooney show. So once again, the one thing that the Bears have done historically is find second, third, fourth round wide receivers that nobody else seemed to care about and turn them into something, a la Alshon Jeffrey, Darnell Mooney. So now, what can they do with Mooney as the primary number 1? What is the ceiling here for this guy this year?
For me, I've got him firmly in wide receiver 2 range. So I've actually got him ranked at right at wide receiver 21. The ECR's got him out just slightly outside of wide receiver 2 range. But for me, he's firmly a wide receiver 2. If he finished higher than that, though, it really wouldn't shock me. So for me, he's the only wide receiver on this team that you will be drafting. It's really that simple because, as we'll get into, there's no competition here. It's Darnell Mooney and the Pips, and that's disrespectful to the actual Pips, like the musicians. So that's where we're at, folks. It's just the Darnell Mooney experience. So, Mike, do you have anything? Are you more bullish than that?
I'm confident in Mooney's ability and the target share he's going to have. I mean, even with Robinson, albeit hurt most of the season, Robinson last year, Mooney was 6th in team target share among wide receivers. So Fields had the preseason rapport with him and training camp rapport. It went over into the season, and it didn't take long for him to just realize, hey, this is my guy. I'm going to keep passing it to him. He's playing well. Let's just keep going with this. So I think the only concern is going to be, obviously, it's going to likely be a bad team that's going to be trailing often. But does this scheme that we were saying so good for Montgomery hamper Mooney's ability because he doesn't see those double-digit targets every game because they just aren't going to pass the ball as much? They could have a slower pace of play. These are questions that we don't really know about because we haven't seen this scheme really. So I would be happy with him as he would be as we said for Robinson for his ADP, Rashad Bateman in the Baltimore episode.
Yeah.
If you could get a target monster like him as your wide receiver 3, you're ecstatic. As a wide receiver 2, you are happy.
Right. And that's the biggest thing for me is this is another situation. I'm glad you brought up Bateman because it's the exact same thing. I've got him as a top 12 wide receiver because it's a bad team that's going to be constantly chasing points. And even if they're throwing a ton or rushing a ton, they still have to throw the ball. Mm-hmm. They still have to keep defenses honest by throwing the ball at least some. And when you look at this list, who else are they throwing the ball to? It's Darnell Mooney, it's Cole Kmet, and it's David Montgomery. Those are your only options that you can really feel confident in. And Darnell Mooney, like we said, he had the connection with Fields last year, which is exactly what you're looking for. He had a very good season last season. He ended up having, all but 2 games from weeks 8 through 18. He had at least 10 fantasy points in PPR. So he was consistent. He was solid. He provided you what you needed to do. And again, he's going to be the clear-cut number 1 on this team. And right now, he's wide receiver 25 in ADP.
Right.
So I have him ranked 11. But again, I'm not saying go out and get him with your first or second round pick. He's going in the 6th round, at the top of the 6th round in ADP. So if you can get him in the 5th round or the 4th round, fantastic. I feel like you got a top 12 wide receiver 1 at a discount.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way
the reason I keep him in wide receiver 2 is my hedge against the Bears going full dumpster fire cake in the rain where everything goes wrong. Montgomery gets hurt, Herbert gets hurt, the defense fails, and then it's literally Darnell Mooney out there playing with 10 people covering him. And it's like that's my hedge. But would it shock? He's one of those guys where would it shock me if he actually finished at like just inside the top 10 at wide receiver? No, not really.
Right.
He has the talent and the raw ability. He is that good of an athlete. So
Yeah.
it's an intriguing name that a lot of upside on that for where the ADP is currently sitting.
Yeah, to just to put a bow on it. So last year, which is with Fields for a majority of it, but Montgomery, David Montgomery in the backfield, but you had Darnell Mooney, you still had Cole Kmet, who was number 2, and then Allen Robinson. And Mooney led the team with 140 targets. Now, were they all great targets? No. Some of that was Nick Foles and Andy Dalton, but still led the team with 140 targets. Kmet was number 2 with 93, and then Allen Robinson with 66, and Montgomery with 51. You're coming over from this Colts system, this new coaching staff, where they had Michael Pittman as the number 1 focus, who was a wide receiver 2 for most of the season last year. Again, was that Wentz or the system? I guess we're going to find out here, because it's virtually the exact same thing, where it's really just one guy that you can focus in on. And then even you look at the year before that, 2 years ago, you had Allen Robinson with 151 targets, led the team, 98 for Mooney. So virtually the same numbers in this offense the last 2 seasons. Again, it's all new because Matt Nagy and that staff is gone and it's a new coaching staff. But I think if you look at the comparables to Indianapolis, it's still all systems go for me for Darnell Mooney. Outside of that, though, I don't care about the rest of this wide receiver room.
You don't want to talk about N'Keal Harry anymore?
Great.
Let's move on.
Yeah, you've got it's the island of misfit toys on this. I mean, it's everybody's garbage that they have just picked up and are recycling.
They're going around and collecting other people's wide receiver 5s like they're freaking Thanos. Mm-hmm. Like, get the infinity gauntlet of horrible wide receiver 5s. Like, they just went and got them all, and then they drafted Daz Newsome and Velus Jones. And it's like, Velus Jones is a nice story, but he's a 25-year-old rookie who played at Tennessee, and all he's going to probably likely do is run kicks.
Punt returner, yeah.
Yeah, he's going to run kicks for you. That's nice. But if you play a kick, it's Cordarrelle Patterson. Remember that? Yeah. It's the same. It's the same exact. It's the same exact college, and it's the same exact landing spot. So what are you going to do with any of this? If you play in a kick and punt return league, sure, but there's nothing to discuss.
I don't want Velus Jones. There's no upside there.
No.
Nasimba Webster's been on 3 different teams and has not even made the roster on 2 of them. Daz Newsome's been lingering with the Bears forever, doesn't do anything. N'Keal Harry comes over from the Patriots, and he's fighting for a starting job with Equanimeous St. Brown, who even in a terrible wide receiver room in Green Bay couldn't find the field. Then you've got Byron Pringle, who is constantly fighting to be the wide receiver 4 in Kansas City and couldn't find the field and finds his way to Chicago. Tajay Sharp. Dante Pettis
also has off-the-field issues that might prevent him from playing, by the way. Yeah. So let's not.
But that happened so long ago at this point, they may have just swept that under the rug like it never happened, and they're ready to just move past it and keep
possibly.
I think if they were going to cut him for that reason, they would have done it by now. But I feel like there's every chance he's just horrendous in training camp, and then that
does it anyway. Sure.
Yeah.
Anyone on this 100%. Roster behind Mooney could have that situation happen.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Nobody in that wide receiver room is actually safe with a roster spot.
When it's the middle of the second quarter in week 2 of the preseason and you're watching Trevor Siemian throw to Nasimba Webster, boy, oh boy, that is going to be rough. Let me tell you.
And how bad it is that we didn't even mention Dante Pettis.
I did mention Dante.
Oh, did
Pettis.
you? Okay.
That makes
I might have just blocked it out.
Sums it up all right there.
I'm looking at. I'm having a hard time hearing you because I'm reading this, and my inner voice is just it's just screaming so loud.
100%.
See, and we've gone the whole time talking about all the wide receivers and didn't even mention that Velus Jones is an ancient wide receiver.
Nope, we mentioned that too.
Nope,
See,
covered
we're all
that.
just blocking it up.
Covered that. I mentioned he was 25 right off the top. Mentioned that too.
Like I said, this whole wide receiver room, you just got to block it out.
It's just like a buzzing noise in your ear.
Exactly.
It's like I have drunk bees in my head looking at this. We got to move on. We got to go to tight end.
So Cole Kmet. So this is finally his opportunity. Year 3, I believe, for Cole Kmet. Am I right in that? 3 or 4, something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
They cut Jimmy Graham in the offseason, finally. Got that dead weight contract off of the books. So now he's gone. They bring in Ryan Griffin from the Jets.
Get that new dead weight contract on the books, baby.
Exactly. They also brought in James O'Shaughnessy. So they've got some veteran depth behind Cole Kmet, but make no mistake about it, those are blocking tight ends. They've never been pass catchers in their career. They could be threats at the goal line in your 2 tight end sets.
Sure.
But Cole Kmet is the guy who, like I said, is going to be the safety valve. He's going to be the legit number 2 target option in this offense over the middle. He is somebody that I am willing to bet on, but again, bet on in the sense that I punt tight end anyway.
Right.
So if I don't get a top 4 or 5 tight end, I'm really waiting until a decent one is available in the 12th or 13th round. So if Cole Kmet happens to be there, great. He's a guy that's got upside that could finish in the top 10, but he could also finish outside the top 20. That's how tight end works. So touchdown dependent, but he will have volume unlike some of the other guys in his range.
I was going to say, I have him ranked at tight end 10. You have him ranked at tight end 11. But as you pointed out, that can be misleading because that does not mean that I want to put ADP
more about tight end than him. Yeah,
it does. It says a lot more about tight end than him because it's like, great, I could get a tight end 10 doesn't really mean anything. Tight end 10 is like who's left at the end of my draft that fell for whatever reason down the draft board that I can have at something resembling a value. But at least with Cole Kmet, you do get some level of upside. Mike, what was your stat here?
Yeah, Kmet's just inability to get a touchdown was pretty astonishing last year. Like he almost had to try to not get in the end zone to have as many targets as he did without scoring a touchdown. It was the 3rd most by any offensive player since 2014, which is pretty crazy.
That's impressive.
That's pretty nuts.
So there has to be some form of positive.
I feel like Jacoby Myers has
regression.
to be on that list.
Yeah, somewhere. Covered that a lot. We did cover that a lot.
Laviska Shenault is the only one that had more in 2021.
That also makes me sad. Thank you for bringing that
up.
I appreciate it.
And the show. And the
Boy,
show.
This is just a kick me in the nuts kind of day, isn't it? Thanks, guys. Wow. Wow. But yeah, I mean, right now, Kmet's going in virtually the same ADP range as his quarterback, Justin Fields. He's going in the mid to late 11th round. So perfect candidate to wait on tight end, grab him later. You're all set. Do we even want to talk about defense and kicker? I don't think so.
I don't think this one.
Defense doesn't matter. Cairo Santos doesn't matter.
Yeah, doesn't make it. I was saying wrap the show.
Yeah.
Like we're good here, baby. We're going round the horn here.
That's the best we can possibly do on an episode about the Bears. So there you go. Any parting thoughts about Chicago before we wrap this up?
You do get a little weird amount of upside with Cole Kmet and Justin Fields. They both occupy that kind of interesting space where it's like we don't know yet, so there is still that mystique, and I think they're both worth it at that point. And then you've got Montgomery and Mooney, and then honestly, like that's just kind of the synopsis. There's 4 players, and then the rest of it is just stay far away. Don't touch it with a 100-foot clown pole.
Yeah, I mean, this is a similar situation. I'm going to preface this with a very, very light version of it. Of whenever Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews were late round targets the year that they broke out. It was an athletic quarterback with an athletic tight end that was one of the better options on the offense. And you got them in 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like late in the draft. So you didn't have to pay as much, but you had the upside that if these players hit, it can mean such big things for your team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's the youth movement in Chicago, right? Like Mooney and Montgomery are both 25. Kmet's 23. Justin Fields is 23.
Right.
So it's all about youth, inexperience, but they're trying to rebuild the franchise over there. And then again, everybody else that we mentioned just does not matter. They're just not worth your time in any way, shape, or form. So that's it. That wraps it up. Done with Chicago. Tomorrow on to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati. On to Cincinnati. But yeah, again, patreon.com/important nonsense. If you want to get these a couple days earlier, hop in the Discord, ask us whatever questions And like I said, we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!